One.
Hello, everybody. We are back here, back live with another exciting recording of the podcast formerly known as 100 Yards of Podcast. You know what? Now that I think about it, we named ourselves, in honor of Prince a little bit right there. Maybe we should get ourselves a special symbol, kind of like a gender football kind of thing. I don't know. Anyways, you have us back here, your normal hosts. We got Omar, Rashan, Soda Pop Borja, and you have myself, Marshall Stovall here. And like the Beatles today, we are here to take you on a little journey. Here comes the ASun. Do 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 do. Here comes the ASun. Do 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 do. Omar, what do you got for us?
I'm pretty impressed by that introduction, Marshall. That was really good. That wasn't what I had in mind when you said you had something prepared, uh, but I like it. So this week, some conference news, some conference realignment news came out. I mean, well, it already happened previously this year, or like I guess in December, January. But the ASun laid out the guidelines for their first couple years of play. And to be honest with you, there's some pretty good ideas that they have in there. So in this first year, they're still trying to figure out, well, the ASun at least is still trying to figure out membership and get to 6 members. There's going to be the Titanic ASun WAC Challenge, where both conferences will merge like the AFL and the NFL in 1970, but only for 1 year. And 7 schools will compete for a playoff berth. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. I mean, first off, that's pretty cool. But that's not the best idea. One of the best ideas, at least. An idea that I like a lot is let's go to the United Atlanta Classic. And for me, I think this is great because the ASun is linking up with a market, crowded as it is in Atlanta, with the SEC controlling it, of course. And then you have the Sun Belt and Conference USA each having some sort of like foothold in Atlanta, in the South, because the South is a crowded place for college football, but for them to attach themselves to a big market within their geographical footprint, I think that's a great idea, and I think other conferences can follow suit. Conferences that don't have a neutral site conference championship game like the MAC or Big Ten or any other Power 5 conference. What are your thoughts, Marshall, on that?
Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty decent idea. I think that's super interesting, though, about like merging 2 conferences. Like that's such a unique idea, but you know what? It's interesting because it like just genuinely makes sense. It's like, especially in a year, in a year like this year, I think a lot of conferences, like what were those conferences that were discussing, the FCS team, conferences that just completely canceled their seasons? We had the Ivy League, right? We have the Patriot League.
The Patriot League's still playing, but the MEAC, they're not holding a formal championship.
Got it. So, I mean, why don't like all of those conferences just also follow suit, kind of combine a little bit? Because I'm sure there's some teams within each that want to play,
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, at least for this year, in terms of the utility of it, because there's utility in this 1 year ASun WAC merge, and then after that, the conferences are going to go about and do their own thing.
Yeah.
So, in terms of utility, I mean, I think it's a good idea to combine the combining of conferences, and it kind of creates a sort of like American type conference like landscape, which I mean, there's 2 sides of the fence to it. Either you love regional rivalries or you love just a conference with a lot of sprawl. And in the FCS, you won't find big like TV market revenue generators in the FCS, but it's got to be fun for the fan bases, for a fan of like Eastern Kentucky to be heading out to, say, I guess Dixie State, or Tarleton, even though they won't be competing for an AQ, it's still like a lot of sprawl and a lot of fun for the fan bases.
No, that's super. Yeah, that's actually super cool. And sorry, what was your other question? Point on conference champ. What was that again? Sorry.
Oh yeah, so part of the from the commissioner's desk release for the ASA, which I think is pretty cool name for that. They have the United Atlanta Classic, where they're gonna have like a doubleheader in Atlanta, and they're partnering with the mayor and the Atlanta Sports Council, to organize a multi-game series each year. And I think that's an idea that a lot of conferences, even like in the FBS, especially the Group of 5, can follow suit with, just to partner with a huge market and I guess sort of have like that sort of flagship city.
Interesting. So almost like, let's say, so is it like set the teams that play in this, or is it like to be determined, like based on who's strong? Or
so that one might be I think it might be to be determined. They might move a conference game there after the season starts. It's really vague. It just had that one bullet point that they're gonna partner with the mayor to have a series of games in Atlanta.
Okay, interesting. So it'd be like, let's say like the American were to do something, right? So like maybe it's like perhaps the American does like a multi-game series. I guess how does that like factor in? So multi-game, is it like the same teams like in a multi-game series? Like it's like the same two teams in like a 3-game series
So
or a
from
2-game series?
what I assume it's like a double header. I'd say
Okay,
double, triple header, maybe. And yeah, I don't think like one team will be playing multiple games. It's just like a double header of like games that are attractive to
got
a
it.
conference.
Like back to back.
Yeah.
So it'd be like, let's say the American like takes like Dallas, right? And then you take like a SMU Cincinnati, and then you take um, like a Tulane Memphis, for instance, like back to back doubleheader. Is that kind of what the idea is here?
I would think so. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's actually that's actually a pretty decent idea. I think so for the MAC, like who do you think I imagine you had some ideas on that already then.
Yeah, I mean, not so much the MAC. So for me, the idea comes with conferences that don't really have, I guess, a neutral site or conference championship game. Like the MAC has, they have Detroit on a Friday night. I mean,
Got
that's
it.
sort of their thing. That's their city. Uh, Conference USA, not so much. It might be harder for conferences with like a lot of reach geographically because it's hard to decide a central location for Conference USA when the conference extends from Norfolk, Virginia, to El Paso, Texas. Like, it's hard to decide a central location. But I mean, a conference I had in mind is, I mean, in the FCS, like the Northeast Conference,
Okay.
because that's a conference in terms of football that has, I think, two schools. Yeah, two schools in New York City, or at least on Long Island, close to New
Yeah.
York City, uh, another in New Jersey, I believe, and one in Massachusetts. They could easily take, say, like Giant Stadium. And I'm not saying they're going to fill the stadium, but for them to say, all right, this weekend is the Big Apple Classic. It's a Northeastern Conference football showcase, and really, I guess, place a foot in the biggest media market in the country. And keep in mind that New York City isn't a great college football market. Like Syracuse, for a number of years, tried to market themselves as New York City's college football team and failed. Army's had games there at Yankee Stadium that had low drawing numbers and didn't really attract people. I mean, didn't really project their brand on New York City. Like many people have tried with New York City and failed. So it's kind of a vacuum. So I mean, if you're the Northeast Conference, why not copy the ASun and do like a Big Apple football classic?
That's actually super cool. Maybe like partner with Amazon to boost they're already trying to boost their presence there in New York. Do a little Amazon by Amazon, maybe do an Amazon Prime.
Yeah, I
There's a
mean
lot of talk.
sponsors.
I mean,
Yeah,
there's a lot of talk about Amazon moving their, what was it, like the second headquarters there or whatever. So I don't know, it'd
yeah.
be
I
interesting.
mean,
But I will say, what about if you took this idea, and obviously a little off topic, not FCS, okay? But let's say you took this idea and you took it like all the independent FBS teams partnered up and did something like that. Get a little primetime exposure or something like that.
yeah. I mean, I think that's a great idea, honestly, because there is no like geographic linking really between the independents, but BYU. I'm sure they'd recognize the potential in terms of, I guess, viewership and draw to play like a team like Army
Yeah.
at, say, do a home and home. Like one year BYU plays or hosts, quote unquote, Army at, say, like Mile High Stadium, and then the next year they go to MetLife for a game, or Yankee Stadium,
Yeah.
and sort of do something like that.
I mean, think about it. Maybe you have a little opening dish at little UMass New Mexico State, and then you bring it home, little BYU Army. That'd be an attractive lineup.
Yeah. I mean, I think so too. Like, just like, yeah, exactly. Like, get sort of a double header between the independents because, especially like teams like UMass and New Mexico State, for their fans, they haven't really had many like exciting bowl experiences, like bowl type experiences. I mean, like UMass is an independent.
Yeah.
They went to Hawaii in 2016, and that's about the funnest trip that they've had. I mean, I think they went to Florida as well in 2016, like a couple trips to Florida here and there, but there's just like not much like trips to excite the fan bases really.
Yeah.
In New Mexico State for sure, like as well. I mean, it's already climate wise great out in Las Cruces, but in terms of playing at big time venues, there really isn't much for New Mexico State to do except to see their team get clobbered at, like, say, Bryant Denny, like they did in 2019.
Maybe you host it at like a historic stadium that has it's starting to like get a little ICUs even. That'd be kind of interesting. But
Yeah. I mean,
but
like the Cotton Bowl.
you
Yeah.
know, yeah. I mean, I was gonna say that, but then I was like, I already said Dallas before, so I didn't want to say it again. But it's like, but I do agree. Cotton Bowl, that's like it's one of the more perfect venue kind of spots for that. But anyways.
I think a city that could benefit from something like this. It's kind of awkward because there isn't really like a great fit conference wise. But if you take St. Louis, a conference that's still or an area that still has like a big stadium, I mean obsolete by today's standards and kind of a dump. I'm not gonna hype up the Edward Jones Dome as some kind of like great transcendent venue, but it's there. And say you have I mean, the MAC's kind of an awkward fit. You can't do the MAC really, but say you have like the Missouri Valley Conference and you have a weekend where you have North Dakota State, Missouri State for like the primetime game and like some other conference game as a lead-in. Like that could bring in, tourism to St. Louis that just wasn't there.
That's kind of hot right there. That's and it's like you've mentioned before, like North Dakota State, those fans travel well.
Yeah.
So
they do.
That'd be pretty interesting. What was it you were posting about North Dakota State, them losing?
Oh,
a little commentary right here. I know you're going to talk about it more in depth on Hardware Podcast. Check that one out. Make sure all of you are going out with Jackson, but maybe a little intro.
I wasn't really posting much about North Dakota State. I was posting about Furman because Furman had a really tough weekend.
Okay.
Because they missed an extra point, and then I just tuned into this game, and the first play that I see, they're in VMI territory with under a minute, and a man goes in motion, and they snap it, hits the man in motion, VMI recovers. So VMI is looking for their first winning season since '81. So I mean, if I look at that, I'm like, that's a team of destiny. Like that's just a moment that's like, what are the odds? Like,
is VMI is that the Virginia Military Institute?
It is, yes, the very esteemed Virginia Military Institute that stole all of West Point's uniforms and looks just like us, except in Virginia.
Funny. That's funny.
But I mean, I'm rooting for them because no team deserves to go like 39 years without a winning record. That's incredibly sad.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, I mean, I know it's like New Mexico State, they went, and who are a lot of the other teams that went without bowl games? But I don't know. Well, I guess you can't really have a winning season, because then if you did, you would have had a bowl game. But
well, I mean, New Mexico State had some winning years, but there just weren't enough bowl games, or their conference only had one bowl game, and they weren't the conference champ. So they did have winning years in between then, but yeah, it was just all due to the bowl situation. Like, I don't think we'll ever see droughts like that ever again because there's 44 bowls and there's going to be teams with losing records in those bowls. So if you end up at 6-6, like, you're going to make a bowl.
Interesting. Well, we might as well just change the name of this podcast because all we do is talk about New Mexico State, it seems like.
And it's not because we paid for an ad. That's not why. It's an interesting situation just given geography and history.
Yeah.
But another idea about the ASun that I liked a lot and I think can translate very well into like pretty much all levels of college football is they have an ASun Big South like football challenge, like a weekend where they're going to have or they call it a challenge series where they're talking with the Big South, and on the final weekend of the FCS regular season, they're going to match up teams based on conference standings to sort of boost their profile for the FCS playoffs. And this is huge because the way that the FCS playoffs works in a normal season, this year is only 16 teams, so it's a 24-team playoff. So we have 16 first-round games, which you have 16 teams playing the first round, so 8 first-round games, and you have 8 bye weeks. And it all comes down to just strength of schedule, non-conference games and stuff like that, where you're either playing on the road or even then you get bumped up to a bye week. So one of these non-conference games could be just what they need to get that bye week or to flip it into hosting in the first round of the playoffs. And I think this could help a lot of teams in FBS. I mean, which before I go on more, I want to ask your opinion on this, Marshall.
Yeah, that's just absolutely like game changing. That's like beautiful. That's poetic. That's a Monet. That's the Monet of college football right there. Because what they're doing is what every FBS team is way too scared to do, right? Like we saw Coastal Carolina and BYU took a shot at it. A very limited shot at it. But if you because it's like when you're getting into the end of the season, what are these teams doing? They're either playing cupcakes, or they're just like wrapping up. You know, they're too afraid to play anyone. Like they're too afraid to lose and knock themselves out of the Division One FBS playoff, right? And if like say imagine like the SEC and the Big Ten did something like that, like you got matchup number 1 Alabama versus number 2 Ohio State, you know, and there's it's actually interesting because if you started doing a series like this, it's almost as if it's like this expanded playoff, right? Because when you start getting into the debate of number 4 versus number 5 versus number 6, right? They all have pretty much a very similar claim. Like we were looking at what Texas A&M and who are those? Who are a couple other teams there this year? It
was A&M, Notre Dame, and
right.
Shoot, I feel like there's one more.
Yeah. That's
I forget.
But you see, like you get the point, right? It's like if you had a little series where these teams, say their conferences happen to have a series, they could play each other. There would be no debate, right? Like people wouldn't be upset. You wouldn't have these fans be mad because these teams would have had a chance to prove themselves. Like I think ideally that's what these conference championship games were supposed to be originally, when it was kind of like everyone was being pushed to kind of have this conference championship. But it just doesn't seem like it's turned out like that. But if you had something like this FCS, dude, that's beautiful. I'm excited for that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, because the Power 5 conferences will be too scared to do something like this. Like we saw it in the 2019 playoff, where pretty much Oregon got penalized for scheduling aggressively like the playoff was supposed to do, and losing the last seconds to Auburn. They got penalized for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was sad, to be honest. I mean, they also got penalized because they couldn't defend Brandon Ayuk on Saturday Night Football, but that's a discussion for another time. Yeah, forks up. But
that's a point of pride for you too, Mr. 49ers top wide receiver.
Yeah, I know. I mean, at the time though, I wanted the Pac-12 to have a playoff berth, so if they could have shut them down just for that game, but there were multiple opportunities that year. But yeah, like the Power 5 conferences never do this, but where I can see this working out is a conference like Conference USA, the Sun Belt, or the MAC, where pretty much the New Year's 6 berths, the 1 year 6 berth for the Group of 5 is always going to the American, or if it's not going to the American, it's going to Boise State. Where say you have like the final weekend, we'll take like we'll go 2019 for an example, because 2020, I mean, like you said, Coastal Carolina already sort of did that sort of like flexible schedule thing. 2019, you have like App State. So like App State going like they're 11-1. They had already beaten South Carolina and North Carolina, and you take the best team out of Conference USA at the time, probably Lane Kiffin's Florida Atlantic squad, who finished the year 9-3. Maybe that win catapults them over say Boise State if they win the title, or when they win the title, or say maybe if Memphis loses in the American Conference title game, that's enough to vault App State over Cincinnati, who has 2 losses. Sure. Like that could just be the margin between making the New Year's 6 and not. And for the Group of 5, making the New Year's 6 it's like almost a matter of, I wouldn't say life and death, but it's just huge in terms of money. For like your conference gets in the New Year's 6, like that is an amazing boon for the conference. And it's not that I guess it is maybe a big deal for the FCS hosting playoff game and having TV rights, but an even bigger deal for the FBS, for the Group 5 at least.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Like years later, people still remember who rowed the boat is for, Like these things like kind of change programs for the next, 5-10 years at least, right? But
yeah, I mean, like I think it's a phenomenal idea, and I think really that kind of shows like the restructure that I guess needs to happen in college football scheduling, in terms where we need to schedule less years ahead and just be more flexible in terms of athletic directors. I don't know why I'm saying we, but in terms of athletic directors, they need to be more flexible. Like this year in the pandemic, you would think they'd stop scheduling games 10 years ahead because programs change. Like 2013, you had Florida State with Jameis Winston. 2020, you have Florida State down 21-7 against Jacksonville State and really looking like an embarrassment in the ACC. Like you just don't know. You got to schedule these games probably like a year before. Like honestly, most FCS schools do. The FCS is doing things right and the FBS isn't, and it's kind of crazy just to think about it, really.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's like, I guess I don't know if necessarily like an event like like the pandemic, I don't know if that would necessarily by itself be enough to get them to stop scheduling so far in advance, because I think they probably more than anything consider this like like the Black Swan event, right? like this is something that you can't really prepare for, so you shouldn't really necessarily worry about it. Like maybe, you obviously have to deal with it when it gets here, but it's not something you're gonna plan, like not stop trying to plan for, if that makes sense at all. But I think, like you said, it definitely highlights that persistent issue. It's like there's absolutely no reason to be scheduling teams, 10 years in advance just to try and get cupcakes on your schedule. Like that's just garbage.
Yeah, I think one element that this sort of type of game, I guess, recreates is sort of like the pole race. And I think the pole race has sort of been missing because it's like arbitrary, it doesn't seem like there's much like a race for like New Year's Six bids anymore. It's always like, okay, if this team, sort of hangs on and the committee still is biased, like then they'll make the New Year's Six. But if you have like high impact games on like the final weekend of college football, like you say, like, I guess this year you have Coastal Carolina versus UAB or Marshall, and that same weekend, say like Indiana's playing, a high impact game. Like it really puts back like the race impact, like the race effect sort of to the New Year's Six, honestly, into the playoff bowl. And I guess the other bowls too, because other bowls get lost in the shuffle too, to be honest, with the playoff.
And you know what? That probably would just boost the profile of the group of five overall, because if you start showing out some of these better teams that they have to offer, not only will you place a stronger opponent against the Power Five team that you get in that New Year's Six bowl, right? And so that you have a better chance of getting that, significant victory. But on the other hand, you also show off, like, let's say you have, I don't know, let's call it 3 series set up like this, right? Like maybe you take top 2 teams in a league, and then maybe the other teams, maybe 2 other leagues give you their top 2 teams, right? Or top team, right? Just this showcasing by itself might be enough to, give a lot of publicity, especially it's like, think about if you're doing this on I guess what weekend would you probably try and do that? Would you try and do this like in lieu of a regular season? I guess you would, right? Like towards the end of the season? How do you think that would fall, like, scheduling wise?
I think you'd want to shift like the whole conference schedule up a week and then have it the week before Thanksgiving weekend, because that's when like a lot of the big rivalries happen in general.
Okay.
Maybe not so much in the group of 5 level, because in the Sun Belt, a lot of those teams are newer to the FBS. But the Mountain West has older rivalries too. The MAC has old rivalries as well. So you want to preserve those on Thanksgiving weekend. So I'd say the week before then.
Okay. I like that. So yeah, and that's definitely enough time to have pictured like who are some of the better teams, right? So that would definitely work.
Something that I just thought of is, in terms of TV rights, I feel like this could be something big as well. Because I'm sure the simple solution, of course, is to give rights to the conferences that are the home team. But say if like they brand these as a separate event and call it like, I guess we'll run with the Conference USA and Sun Belt, like the Conference USA Sun Belt Series or the Sun Belt Max Series, and brand that as a separate event. I guess if networks can like leap on, because as we'll probably talk about in the spring, like CBS is on the clock really in terms of getting like content after the SEC leaves. So that's something that I can see, like the final weekend where CBS has pretty much like on Friday and Saturday night, just like 2 days of just great like conference, like interconference games of national relevance in terms of group of 5.
Definitely so.
So just the ASun, I think they're going to be a name on the rise too. And I think, a bold prediction here, they're doing all the things right as of now, but I think in a couple of years, the MEAC will be no more, because the ASun stands at 5 teams. They need one more team to continue or to start playing football as a well, not really start, but I guess qualify for the playoffs as a conference. And the MEAC has had 3 teams leave. Is it 3? They've had 4 teams leave actually since 2019. And it looks to be more, because for every team in the conference, there seems to be a better fit. And the ASun, with their ambitious plans, looks to be more stable than the MEAC. So I think the ASun is just a name to remember, especially for HBCU fans.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely have to monitor their situation going forward. Like I think they're making some of the right moves, so hopefully this can permeate itself into a more permanent conference.
Yeah, exactly. We'll just have to see. As of now, right now, as of now, sorry, that's weird. But as of now, a bigger pressing issue is the only FBS team playing spring football. I made a bold prediction about said team a couple weeks ago that if they go undefeated, this might be one of the greatest teams in New Mexico State history. That didn't go so well in the first week.
Wasn't there a side thing that was also associated with if this team went undefeated?
Yeah, we're still tracking the Bucknell Bison, hoping to make their first postseason appearance since 35. The Patriot League has not started play yet, so but yeah, just know I'm still tracking the Bison.
I'm talking about a little personal tracking.
Personal tracking.
If New Mexico State went undefeated, it would be the year that you got a girlfriend.
Yeah, along with Bucknell. So I think we're just gonna whittle that down to Bucknell making the postseason.
Oh, okay. So we're still gonna reserve a little bit of hope right there.
Yeah, because the first thing happening, like if something happens for the first time in 86 years, like that's a wake up call.
What was the final score? What was the final score of that New Mexico State?
It was 43-17, and then Tarleton lost this past weekend to Dixie State by 12. So it's not looking good for the Aggies, to be honest with you.
Talking about my team is better than your team action, huh?
Yeah, I mean until the game's played.
I know, until next week.
Yeah, until next week. But I want to ask, like, how big of a game do you think this is for the Aggies? Because like a lot of people, they're sort of like half on, half paying attention to the spring season because, I mean, March Madness is almost in full swing. The NBA is heating up. I mean, the Knicks are at 500. They're tied for the fourth seed in the East. It's an exciting time for many people.
Honestly, after that showing, it's like no one's going to watch it, number one, right? Yeah. And number two, like, so that it's probably shifts to like a more personal issue, I guess, for the Aggies. I think my mind goes to like in terms of recruiting, right? Like, think you're on the recruiting trail. New Mexico State competing, let's say like Tarleton State now, like what, you never thought of a team like that having to compete with them for recruits, right? Like FBS versus FCS, unless it was like, like a North Dakota State kind of character. But now it's like, if they're targeting two recruits, Tarleton State or Dixie State or a lot of other FCS teams that are at that level, they can point and be like, hey, why are you even considering that team? They got absolutely stomped on 43-17. Like we beat them, they beat them, everyone's beating them. Like, why would you want to go play? It's at the FBS level, but you're going to be beyond the worst team, Like it'd be, it would be interesting. I think it's like, who's in the conversation for that, right? For the worst FBS team, right? You got New Mexico State, you got UMass, obviously, right?
Yeah.
So I'd be curious,
yeah.
like UConn, like if you get some of these teams scheduling FCS teams, I wonder how many of them would get upset, because it's like before I was kind of thinking, that, it may be a little bit close for comfort or something, but there's no way, right? So it'd be pretty interesting to see, but I think this definitely hurts them on the recruiting trail. Like their outlook is going to be pretty grim, in my opinion.
Yeah. Do you think, I've seen some like people tweeting out that New Mexico State should move down. Do you think their loss to Tarleton State was grounds to start that conversation? Because I think anyone saying that if you lose bad to an FCS school, that's like you should move down. Like I don't think that's a good take, honestly, because it's just a one game. And yeah, I know New Mexico State hasn't had the best fortunes as an FBS school, but like no one was saying that when they went 3-9 in their first year, whatever they went in their first year as an independent. Now they're saying it now for like a spring game where I'm pretty sure the Aggies didn't start most of their starters. They're just trying to get guys experience.
That's a fair point. And it's like, think about in the recent history, right? They did win a bowl game, right? They have played a decent level of football recently at the FBS level. And so I think, while it may be a bad season for them, I think it may be a little bit premature to jump to that kind of conclusion. Like everyone's going to have perennial losers. Like you mentioned, like UConn, we have right now UMass. But, there are some seasons where these teams are probably going to compete a little closer. Who knows? But maybe this goes back to the argument for relegation, honestly. I mean, maybe it needs to be like more of a multi-season thing. Like maybe it's not like you lose bad one season, you're relegated to FCS, but maybe it's like, you have out of every 5 seasons, let's evaluate your record. If you don't win X amount of games, you're out, or you don't win a bowl game, you're out. Right. But so I think, one spring game, I agree with you. I think it may be a little bit premature there.
I think, so what I do think it kind of affects New Mexico State is in terms of scheduling, where I think a lot of people might view, or a lot of programs might view New Mexico State as a Mickey Mouse program. I don't know a better term to use with a loss of Tarleton State, and they don't want to visit Aggie Memorial Stadium despite holding 30,000 people. Like, and an event that I think of that sort of reflects this is Houston choosing to fill out their schedule with UConn, with a visit to UConn with no return trip. It's just a one-off visit to Rentschler Field out in Hartford on Thanksgiving weekend, I believe, when they probably could have visited New Mexico State. A closer regional foe.
Well, you know what? I mean, they could be just going after a great new rivalry with UConn.
Yeah, a civil conflict of sorts. But like, do you see like that sort of thing happening where, you know, New Mexico State loses respect between teams that like actually need games, and it becomes harder for them to get games?
Yeah, I mean, well, what conference is UConn in? Are they in CUSA or American?
Well, UConn's independent now, so.
Geez,
yeah,
I'm just completely mistaken. Well, apologies to the viewers there for looking like a complete fool, but yeah, I guess, you know, because I was thinking at first, I was like, wait, aren't they in the same conference as Houston? So I guess that could make a little bit of sense, but you know, I guess that wouldn't make sense to bring up anyways. But I back to the main point, right? It's like, I guess it's almost not even worth a debate, because I guess the answer to that question is already yes. You know, like maybe it's like, if New Mexico State is just so bad, you might as well try and go into the new market and try and get a few new faces. I guess, you know, maybe it's like trying to pull a few Northeast recruits for Houston. I don't really know, but it's like, obviously there's not going to be a whole lot for them to do in New Mexico. So, you know, in any case, you know, the Aggies definitely are not helping themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good. I think it's noble what Doug Martin's doing in terms of getting guys playing time, seeing what he's got for, you know, the more important fall season.
Sure.
And also like familiarity with WAC rivals in the future. But it's kind of like more risk than it is a reward, honestly, at this point. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have played, because this will have value in the future. But we might look back and say like this did more harm than it did in the future. But honestly, I think with the quality of play with the future WAC members,
Sure.
you know, in these first couple weeks of FCS season, I think it shows a lot about, you know, maybe the WAC's more ready for an FBS jump than we think. And I know it's like, I'm not saying they're ready to make the jump now, but, you know, looking at it, I thought that the WAC was maybe like 5, 6, 7 years away, possibly more, from moving up to FBS. But after seeing Tarleton beat an established New Mexico State team, an established FBS team on the road, and then seeing Dixie State beat that Tarleton State team. And it wasn't even like Tarleton State was bad, because Tarleton State beat McNeese, or they played McNeese and Ed Orgeron's son to double overtime the week before. So it's not like Tarleton State was any pushover. I mean, I think that just shows like the quality of play is pretty decent, and maybe you're like 3, 4, 5 years away instead of like, you know, the higher end, like 6, 7, 8 years away from moving to FBS. But
interesting.
Well, we'll see as the season progresses.
No, that's actually a really interesting perspective I had not considered. You know, maybe you're right. Maybe the WAC, maybe this Tarleton State team could come in and play Alabama. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, they can play him in the sense of being on the same field. I'm not sure how good of a game.
They both play American rules. They both play American football. Yes.
Yeah, they're both on the same field at the same time. They can play them. Yeah. But I'm trying to think of like the other schools that are joining the WAC that are playing in spring. I mean, like Stephen F. Austin and Abilene Christian both had fall seasons, and Abilene Christian, I was looking up the stats for hardware, and their quarterback Peyton Mansell rolled up over 200 yards. I think it was like 270 yards on Army, an Army team that allowed 160 on defense passing the ball, and they rolled up 23 points, like the second or third highest total in the season. I mean, so they're competitive for sure.
Well, it's like an interesting argument though, because at that point, like, why isn't, you know, the WAC or those members at least already like just dominant within FCS, you know?
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Is there perhaps just more parity among FCS versus FBS than we had previously thought?
I think so. I really do think so, because if you think about the things that make a conference have parity, like you look at the MAC, how the MAC is pretty much a revolving door where literally anyone can win the MAC every couple years. Like every team, it can be their year, quite honestly, except for Ohio, it seems like, where I'm not here to preach the Frank Solich can't coach in big games narrative, because Frank Solich is a great coach, but He's appeared in like 3 or 4 MAC championship games, hasn't won one, and they haven't won a MAC title since '68. But I digress. Where it's like there's a lot of parity, and anyone can win a division title. And you look at it, it's like regional. They're fighting for the same recruits. No one has really a monopoly for over one region. And you look at conferences like the Southland, where it's all centered in like Louisiana and Texas. You look at a conference like the Southern Conference, where they're all fighting for recruits in Virginia, maybe not Virginia because VMI is the only school there, but like Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, the South. And there's just not that much like conferences where like you have the American, where it's like 3 teams that have pretty much an exclusivity on Texas and Oklahoma recruits. And before UConn left, like it was only UConn and Temple having an exclusivity on like Northeastern recruits. Like there's just not really like, I guess, monopolies on recruiting. So I think that's a great point. I think it's more just like regional.
Yeah, and it'll be cool to see because it's like, what's a big selling point a lot of recruits try to go for? It's like they want to be able to say, I play Division I football, right? And, while I guess FCS is still Division I, they want to say, like, even more so, I want to play Division I FBS. Right? Like, you never say FBS, but they want to do it, right? And so if you get some of these FCS teams that are being successful at that level, and then you put them to FBS, who knows? Maybe we got a little upset alert.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And, like, these teams aren't pushovers. Like, I mean, Sam Houston State, I think they made the FCS title game one year. I think it might have been like 2012. But Willie Fritz, Georgia Southern got Willie Fritz from Sam Houston State, and Tulane got Willie Fritz from Georgia Southern. So like that's like one coach that honed his skills in the Southland from one of these WAC schools. And I'm sure there's others, but yeah, like the competition's there. It's great. And like those teams, like a lot of those teams were in FBS in like the 70s and 80s before like the great reclassification happened. And that's pretty much like the Southland Conference is the reason there's an Independence Bowl, because Arkansas State got screwed and they had to create their own bowl game. Like that was the solution back then. Like your conference gets screwed, find a city, create your own bowl game. Like that's why we had the Fiesta Bowl with the WAC. Like the WAC was getting screwed, but yeah, like so. I mean, those schools, they're sort of, I guess, ghost still echoes in the FBS level, and maybe it's time for them to resurrect themselves. Like whenever the WAC comes, maybe that's like the perfect timing for them. But I mean, we'll see.
Well, yeah, we will just have to another case of put a pen in it, right? But
yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm just excited for the WAC to come back. I have a feeling that maybe if Bucknell doesn't go to the postseason, when the WAC comes back, my love life will come back. But you never know.
Oh, you might want to say it. You might want to, qualify that a little bit, because that could be, like you said earlier, 3 or 4 years away. And we don't want you to be
or 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah.
We don't want you to be down bad for another 8 years.
Who knows? I mean, I'm willing to wait for WAC football.
Oh my God.
Maybe not so much on the girls' side, but we'll see.
If there are any, female listeners of this podcast, feel free to hear. We're going to put Omar's email in the comments of this, or in the description of this video. Feel free to reach out, if you're interested in any, extra podcast affairs.
When you say affairs, man, that's kind of dirty. Okay, well, I'm not liking the sound of affairs. Okay, maybe sound like Bill Clinton or something.
Oh my God. I don't know.
I mean, that's all I'm gonna say.
I did not have.
I just love how the end of every episode has become a down bad expose for me. Maybe it adds to the viewership. I mean, maybe it does.
It provides a little bit of relatability, right? That's what makes programs successful, because if people can see themselves living the lives of the characters, you get shows like The Office, you get shows like New Girl, right? They're all just like Friends, right? They're all just average people doing average things.
Yeah, I mean,
that's why people like it. We are normal, it's like, I know we come out here, I know it's like you come out here, especially, sounding all smart, like, all this stuff about football, right? They're probably like, oh my God, Omar's probably pulling in $1 million a year from this podcast, right? Sounding so smart. It's like, no, don't get us wrong. We are just normal people. Do not put us on this pedestal. I know we're like celebrities to some of you listeners, but please.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. That's all I want to be. I just want to be a regular guy. I don't want people paying for my drinks at the bar. I mean, I'm just a regular guy.
I'm tired of walking down the street and the paparazzi just be waiting outside my front door every single day.
Okay. Yeah, it's relatable. I mean, But yeah, I mean, if Marshall has nothing else to say,
Hey, well, I got a
until,
lot to say, all right, but I don't think it's gonna be this is the right place or the right time.
all right, yeah, I mean, as do I. But until next time, we might talk about the Red Tails Classic and maybe with a guest or two. For those of you tracking early season HBCU games, which it's probably a very few number, we might talk about that. But until next time, keep watching that FCS football and peace, love, and soul.
I'm Nixon.